Welcome to the High Vibe Show, living the high vibe life with me, your host, Elisa V, and together with my guests, experts in the art of living in a state of high vibration, we have got an amazing show for you today. My passion is to educate and inspire you to raise your frequency to a high vibrational state. Whether you're an awakened soul to the power of your own consciousness as a light being, or you're new to this spiritual path of expansion and growth, which is made possible through vibrating at a high level, you are in the right place. So stay here to experience fun, frequency upgrades now, so you can manifest all you want and help to raise the collective vibration of our wonderful world. Let's hit the restart button and high vibe it together. The High Vibe Show starts now. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday, and welcome to the High Vibe Show. I'm your host, Elisa V, and we have a really fun show for you today. Remember, this is the place you want to be if you want to learn how to raise your vibration and live in those energies of love, abundance, and joy. Today, I have a super amazing woman on our show, Rachel Russo. She is a dating expert, a relationship strategist, matchmaker, author, speaker, and a single mama by choice. And she is also an educator and a marriage and family therapist. And today, we are going to just dive right into the wonderful world within which she works, which is matchmaking for people. Rachel, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Elisa. I actually loved your introduction, all those kind words, and I'm listening thinking, I want to raise my vibration too. Who doesn't want to live in love and joy and abundance? So what an important message that you're giving to everyone who's listening and watching today.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. And
Oh.
when we got introduced through a mutual friend, and I had no idea, I had heard of like matchmakers, through like, watching Fiddler on the Roof. And there's this kind of, vision that you have of like, this little woman who goes through the town. But actually, this is a professional matchmaker is really quite sophisticated and offers services to people who are looking to find the right relationship in their life. So we're gonna get into that, and I want our listeners to hear all about your, how you got into this. But I want to ask you just one question. This is kind of what I like to ask my guests to kind of kick off every show, and it's really, what is it about what you do that keeps you vibing high in a state of high vibration and makes you feel committed every day to do this?
Sure. Thank you. Great question. I think it's working with people and making a difference in their lives and being able to see that and kind of getting that instant gratification, making someone happy by setting them up on a great date, or even when it wasn't a great date, being there to coach them and counsel them through the feedback process and how they can do better next time and make a better impression on the person they want to attract. So it's all very rewarding to me to just help people in this area that honestly really continues to interest me. I've been doing this for almost 2 decades. So obviously there's some staying power there. There's like a real interest in love and relationships on my part.
Yeah. So how did you start becoming, how did you get into this matchmaking profession that you're in?
Well, as you had mentioned, I have also practiced as a marriage and family therapist. I'm not currently, but I had graduated with a degree from Rutgers in psychology back in 2005. And I took sort of a gap year between college and, going to grad school to pursue marriage and family therapy. I always wanted to work with couples. My parents are still married long time, like over 40 years, but I always remember my mom having like self-help relationship books around the house, and I would pick them up when I was probably like a young adolescent, and I'd read the cover and it would say like, so-and-so is a marital therapist in New York City and helps people with relationships. And somehow I was like, I want to do that. And I did just that in New York City and New Jersey. And, throughout the tri-state area, I primarily work, but also with people throughout the world, really with coaching and, the ability to work virtually. So in that gap year that I took, I stumbled upon a Craigslist ad for they called it a unique social work opportunity. And they were specifically looking for people who had psychology background to be professional matchmakers. And like you, I had never really heard of the profession. Ironically enough, I was in Fiddler on the Roof in high school. So funny you mentioned that. I was the mother. And that's really all I knew about matchmaking. But when I found this out and I had this opportunity to interview for this company, which was a New York City startup company, I thought, wow, this is a profession. I could get paid to help people with their dating. And long story short, I've been in the industry ever since, mostly full time, with some time kind of allocated to helping couples. And, I did go on to get my master's in marriage and family therapy. So I did only a little of that for a few years. But other than that, I've pretty much been matchmaking and dating coaching full time.
Wow. And I guess, the fact that you're so well educated in understanding what's necessary sort of on that psychological level with couples and people, that just gives you a whole added benefit, for your clients to be able to really have like an expert who understands kind of the whole picture, not just setting people up, right?
Oh, definitely. Yes. I think that the clinical backgrounds, the knowledge and actually practicing has helped tremendously. I believe a lot in attachment styles and understanding that in terms of matching people, and also just different personality traits and seeing the way people kind of navigate things like personality disorders or mood disorders, anxiety, depression, and how that impacts relationships. I think that all has to do with compatibility, because I mean, love is one thing, but some couples can love each other, but just not be compatible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna guess that, probably a lot of based on, the title of our show today, that a lot of people that are listening are wondering, okay, so how does this work? How do I find, how do I find a relationship that is, going to be good for me, and how do I find that match? Like, can you explain, different things that people can understand about what you do in the process? And obviously you spoke a little bit about compatibility, but how do you really find that relationship that's going to really complement what you need and give you kind of, the fulfillment on both ends?
Mhm. So I realize everyone probably doesn't have the luxury of working with a professional matchmaker. And so I wish everyone did, but I will tailor this advice to people that are listening that maybe want to figure out, hey, I can't work with a professional, but how can I pick her brain and become my own matchmaker?
Yeah.
How can I attract love on my own, even using some of the strategies that professional matchmakers would? So I'll share what I would do with a client who came to me, and then whoever's listening can apply that to their own relationships, love life, who they want to attract. And I think it's really about the first step that is key. And I'm sure that you would be on board with this. This is knowing who you are and what you want, and really having, as corny as it sounds, that self-love, that self-esteem and self-respect, and just really being clear on what it is that you value as a person and what you bring to the table, what your strengths are, before you even get out there on the dating scene. So I'm definitely very pro coaching. And I always do a coaching session with people that work with me in this capacity, where I really dive into what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are too, and get an understanding of who they are at this time in their life, why they're looking for love, and what they want out of the relationship, so that they can go in and kind of make informed decisions and not just get into relationships by default. Like, when I say default, I feel like a lot of people do that. Maybe it's the first person on a dating app that seemed halfway normal that they just dive into a relationship with. Or maybe it's the first person, sadly, that treated them well and wasn't like abusive because they come from a background where they've had poor models of relationships and they see that interaction. So they just fall into that. This is about being conscious. So like consciously knowing who you are. And then I talk to my clients about their wish list, and that's the person that they want to attract. Like if it was, they can have everything that they want. We know that's not true, but if they can wave that magic wand and get 100% of what they want, what would that look like? And I actually have them write that out. What's your wish list? What's the top 10 things? And then we look at it and narrow it down and see what is a must have that they absolutely would have to have in their relationship. And then what's really more of a preference. And then I look at, okay, where is there like wiggle room? It's funny because the friend that introduced us, Mike, is in real estate. And I always say that it's similar. And people will go to the realtor and they'll tell them what they want, but the realtor knows the market. And I know the market of singles. So when people are coming to me, I'm able to tell them, is this unrealistic for what you want? Just as a broker would tell them, no, you have to go way above asking price if you want this property. So I have to give them an idea of the people that they want. Is that what are they what those people are looking for? And sometimes there's like a huge disconnect between who people want. I hate to say what's out of your league, but sometimes it's a little out of your league. And you're like, okay, if it's women listening, maybe the guy with the six pack that's 6'4", it doesn't really matter if I'm like 5'8". Yeah, that would be nice, but he'll still be towering over me, even if he was 6'1". Or 5'11". So I try to walk people through what's important and what's not, and then help them to create opportunities for themselves. I would present matches to them and people that I've vetted that they can meet, but someone can replicate this in their own life by looking at, okay, well, what are the options? Is this a good option for me? Whether it's in person, whether it's online, through a friend, really thinking about each introduction and if this is someone they should be going out with or not.
Yeah. I love what you said about, this idea of setting, putting together what you're looking for because, in my professional practice, which is life coaching, which is, primarily about working with people who've gone through divorce. So I'm sort of on the back end from where you are, when unfortunately relationships don't work out and one of the first things I always get people to realize is that when you are now going into this new part of your life, right? You're breaking up a relationship. The most important thing you can do is know yourself because there's a possibility that when you got into this relationship or throughout the relationship, the marriage, the amount of time you've been together, you've sort of either never had enough or lost that sense of who you are, what's important to you, what your values are, what your goals are. And so I think for both of us, anytime you're coaching someone, you're really trying to get them to get in touch as deeply as they can and become as aware as they can of what it is that is important to them, barring any other people in their lives, what's at my core and what do I want and what is going to make me happy and fulfilled. And similarly, when it comes to like what I do with divorce, there's that ideal of how you want everything and what you want to get out of it. And, I have to sometimes, unfortunately, be a little bit of like, that voice of reason to say, okay, you may not always get 100%, but let's look at what, the kind of this is a must have. And then what are the things that I would like, but I understand if I don't get them. So I think that's really key that when you're working with people trying to start a new relationship and find a new relationship, that they start with themselves and have that kind of relationship with themselves, where they're kind and loving to themselves so that they are more open to having that in return. Would you say that's a fair thing?
Oh, totally fair. And a lot of the clients that I've worked with have come from relationships that ended or divorces, and they're particularly vulnerable. And like you said, they do lose touch with who they are and what they want sometimes, especially after being in a relationship or a marriage for a long time or even a short time. It's easy to lose that sense. So they kind of have to get grounded somehow and figure out what it is that they need and want and not fall into those same patterns.
Yeah. So, just kind of from an objective standpoint, what do you believe makes for a compatible partner? Is that something you can kind of explain or give some tips on?
Yes, definitely. So a lot of people ask about that, and I don't think it's having all of the same interests. I don't think it's that you have to play golf because they play golf, or like all the same foods, because yes, it would be easier to cook together if you ate the same thing for dinner. Those are signs of compatibility, but you can also have the type of compatibility with a friend. And you could have interest and you should have interest outside of your relationship, so that it's not all about like your life 24/7 with your partner. It's good to have that independence. So if it's not that, what is it? I feel like it's really an emotional connection that leads to the romantic connection. And some of it is hard to explain, right? It's just that chemistry and that sense of simpatico and just rapport that you either have or you don't have. Like you just feel that comfort with some people and you don't with others. And that's where part of my job is very intuitive, because I just know who to set up, who would like each other, who wouldn't, and it can't really be explained. But then there's part of it that could be explained. And I think that part would be similar vision for your life and what you want out of it. And that comes down to values. So another thing that I do with all of my matchmaking and coaching clients is, if they're interested in doing a values assessment and really breaking it down, what are their top values? So this isn't just the wish list of the qualities that they want in a partner that are more objective, but these are the values. And this is where it gets really important. So for instance, as you mentioned, I'm a solo mom by choice. I had my daughter with the donor, anonymous, long story, but it's awesome. And
Congratulations on
I
that.
Yes, thanks. And I realized that, okay, a lot of stuff comes up when you're parenting, right? And
Yeah.
so education is a value of mine, a strong value that I want her to have really good education as best as she possibly can. And so if I was matched with someone who didn't care about education, that could affect everything from where you live to the people that you associate to the activities. Maybe you do story hour, maybe you plant your kid in front of a TV all day, whatever it is. This is where conflict happens, because you can have different values as to how to parent or to educate. And I see that people can really like each other and they can have that emotional connection, they can love each other. But if their values contradict each other and they don't know how to resolve problems, and if too many values contradict each other, then they're just not compatible. So I guess my advice is, look for someone who you have that emotional connection with, but that isn't enough. You have to also really get to know someone and what their core values are, so that you can have like the same type of vision for your present and your future together.
Yeah, and I think on the subject of values, because that comes up a lot too. When I'm coaching, it's also that a lot of people don't really have, like, they're not in touch with their values. They may live their values, but to actually take it, put it on paper, look at it, discuss it is very different, and then it becomes very conscious and top of mind with whatever you're doing in life, right? Whether it's finding a partner or pursuing a job or the way you raise your children. So I think that's an excellent point. So what would you say, kind of on the flip side, what would you say are some of the red flags that someone might want to look for, when they're out there dating and looking for a serious relationship?
So I love looking for red flags. Let me just tell you, I feel like I'm part detective, and I always say that. There's basically two kinds of red flags when I'm working with someone. The first one is red flags that should be for everybody. They're red flags of someone who's not ready for a serious committed relationship. And that may be things that you don't necessarily know right away. Unfortunately, you find out later. But maybe, if you're looking for a monogamous relationship and somebody is interested in having multiple partners, then obviously you're not a match and there could be infidelity. So if that's going on, then you're not aligned. If there's any type of addiction that they're not actively, they're in that addiction, they're not like working in recovery, that's a
Mhm.
red flag. They should have that kind of under control, or less, at least in the works, before they're getting into a serious relationship. So Other red flags, obviously, someone who is lying or, disrespecting, being abusive, emotionally, physically, anything in any way, these are red flags for everyone. This is not a healthy relationship. And then there are red flags specifically for an individual. So, like I was talking about, really knowing your values. And some things, if your values contradict, then it's a red flag for you. For some people, it's differences in religion and politics. Those are really hot topics and they matter a lot to people, especially nowadays with the politics. So that could be a red flag if that can't be worked out, if people are too extreme in their views. If they can kind of like respect each other's differences, then maybe it's not a red flag. So some of it comes down to personality, I think. And there are certain personalities that maybe wouldn't mesh well together and they would be triggering to each other. And triggering at worst, at best, just not that comfortable. So a lot of people talk about extroverted, introverted. This is something I look at too as a matchmaker. If you're super, super extroverted and you want to be out every night and your partner gets depleted by being in like large crowds, you have to either think about, are you going to be going out alone all the time? Is that okay with both of you? Or, should you find someone who maybe wants to have that same appetite for you as new experiences, socializing, and adventure? So it doesn't make people bad people. It just means that they're different. And those are type of red flags that really show differences in values and personality.
Yeah, and I think that probably leads to what we see or we hear about, where one person's always trying to change the other person.
Mhm.
And, if something is intrinsic and part of a person's makeup, you're not going to change that, nor should you want to, right? You don't want someone to be someone that they're not. But I think that's where we often hear, someone's been doing something, has been doing this for 15 years, and well, maybe that's just who he is or who she is, and it might just be like you said, a compatibility issue, that if people were more in touch with themselves at the beginning of the relationship, they would spot that, like, great person, I could have a nice time with them, but long term we're gonna clash, because he does this or she does
Definitely.
this, and it's not, I'm gonna always want to change it. Yeah, I you see that all the time, right? Just in people,
Oh,
and family, and yeah.
all this time. And unfortunately, I could even speak personally. That's a lesson that was very hard for me to learn. And you too, as a helper and a healer, like you kind of think people could change. But then in my own relationships as well, I realized some things cannot change. And even if people really want to change them, it's so hard if it's like their core personality of who they are, who they were developmentally. Some of this stuff goes back to early childhood. So it's an uphill battle. So you have to kind of accept what can be changed and what can't be changed before entering into any relationship.
Yeah. And I think the basis of a good relationship, obviously we all have conflict, right? That's normal, and it can be healthy because you can grow from that. But I think that becomes like, we shouldn't want to change, who someone is, right? We should want to be with them because of what they do bring. And often then that, I think, becomes very wearing on people's self-esteem, because there may not be anything wrong with that person. They're just not compatible, and then I see in what I do kind of the end result of that, well, these
Yeah.
people just weren't
Yes.
compatible. And now this person's going to need to really do a little bit of work on themselves to kind of, bring that sense of self-esteem and feeling good about themselves.
Mhm.
Again, not someone who's, like you said, the really major red flags of being abusive or, that type of thing, but just because of who they are, that they've sort
Right.
of been punished, if you will. So
Exactly.
we are, we're winding down a little, but I did want to ask you one more question.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to ask you, how does someone know when they're truly ready, for having that, what I would call, really long-term committed, permanent, relationship, if you will?
Mm. Well, you definitely know when you're not ready. Right? Like if you really look inside yourself and you have all of these excuses and all of these fears about why you can't date, then you're not ready. There's times that you're just not ready. But how do you know when you're really ready? I think if it's something that is on your mind all the time, it's something that you think about day and night, it's, a feeling that you had that you're longing for this relationship, and you don't go a day without thinking about it, I think you're ready to the point that like you really want it. Like if you want it badly enough, then you're going to overcome the obstacles. You don't have to be perfect to go out there and find a relationship. And no one would be in relationships if you had to be perfect. So when I say you're ready, it doesn't mean that like all your ducks are in a row and everything is like together in your life, but you have that strong desire and there's nothing really stopping you. There's not a reason that you think you shouldn't focus on this now. So you want to go in and, you know, despite your fears, you're ready to go in and you have that like laser focus that you should just go for it. You have that feeling like it's the time.
Yeah, you feel it. Okay.
Mhm.
So, I want to ask you, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
So I do have my website, which is just in my name. I don't know if you could post it, but it's rachelrusso.com,
Okay.
RACHELRUSSO. And on my website, I have my email, rachel@rachelrusso.com, as well as all of the little icons that will connect you to my social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm on as well.
Okay, great. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, as an author, you did have a book that you published. And is there a way, can you just tell the title and how people might be able to get that if they're interested in reading it?
Yes, definitely. So there is a link on my website to the books I published as well. The one that you're referring to would be relevant for the listeners. The other is a matchmaking book about how to become a matchmaker. So, I mean, if you want that, that's a different story. Just go to rachelrusso.com under books and you'll see the books. There is a link to my Amazon book, and that is about breakups and getting over breakups or divorce, really. It's called How to Get Over Your Ex, a step-by-step guide to mend a broken heart, Italian American style.
Wow. Wow,
And
I
I just
love that little twist.
thank you. I just want to say that you do not have to be Italian American. Obviously, I am Italian American and I have an appreciation for the culture. And I took that and applied that to getting over breakups. But everybody can read this book, and I think they'll appreciate the humor and that cultural perspective.
That's great. And as an Italian American, I think I can relate to what you're talking about. Well, Rachel, this was so amazing. I'm so glad you came on. I think you've really given our listeners a lot to think about, from a very strategic standpoint on how to go about finding the right partner in the right way and to assess yourself, and what's important to you so that you find yourself moving in the right direction to finding the right person. Thanks for listening today, everybody. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I always look forward to hearing from you and any thoughts you have on our shows or things you'd like to hear about more. You can reach me at hittingtherestartbutton.com. And until next time, have a wonderful high vibe day.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to The High Vibe Show, living the high vibe life. I'm your host, Elisa V, the Queen of High Vibe. Join us every first and third Monday of the month at 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 Eastern on Transformation Talk Radio. This is the place to come for you to have loads of fun, frequency upgrades now, and have great guests to hear all about raising your frequency. For more information, visit hittingtherestartbutton.com. See you next time.